Representative Maxine Waters of California is famous for her now well-known phrase, "I'm reclaiming my time." This phrase, used by many, if not all members of Congress, is a nice and collegial way to say to someone, "You've taken up enough of my time. I'm taking back control." Today begins our journey through the season of Lent, a time of repentance and reevaluation of our faith and seeing how we stack up to the way in which Christ wants us to live our lives. Lent offers us an opportunity to wipe the slate clean and begin anew, to take control of our faith, or, as some might say, to reclaim our faith. Our Gospel reading for today offers 3 ways in which we can refocus our attention on God. Known as the 3 marks of Lent, almsgiving, prayer, and fasting, these disciplines offer us a method to draw closer to God through the practice of putting Him back in the center of our lives. Through the working of the 3 marks of Lent, we draw ourselves ever closer to God and push aside the distractions of the outside world. It is hard enough to be a practicing Catholic in today's world. We must also deal with voices of dissent from within our own faith, voices which condemn us and tell us we're not worthy of the gifts of our baptism. We must push aside these distractions, know we are beloved children of God, and reclaim our faith. In our Gospel reading from St. Mark, Jesus tells the disciples that when giving alms, they must do so quietly that their almsgiving should be in secret instead of blowing a trumpet before you. In 2 of the Gospel accounts, Jesus points out a widow who makes her donation at the temple treasury. At the temple, coins were placed into mouthpieces of large horn-like devices which would clang and make noise. The more coins which were inserted, the more noise would be made, and the attention of those who were close by would turn towards the person donating. All those around would be alerted to the presence, prestige, and wealth of the person making their donations. The widow had only 2 mites, 2 small coins of relatively no worth, which would have made no sound whatsoever in the horns. As Jesus says to the disciples, "I tell you truly, this poor widow put in more than all the rest, for those others have made offerings from their surplus wealth, but she, from her poverty, has offered her whole livelihood. She gave not for prestige nor notoriety, but for her love of God. She gave all that she had, and in so doing, she reclaimed her faith." Jesus next tells the disciples to pray quietly, in secret in their rooms, not in the synagogues or on the street corners like hypocrites, where everyone else might see them. In the book of Daniel, we hear the story of King Nebuchadnezzar, who constructed a very large statue and instructed the people to fall down and worship the statue when they hear the music play. Those who did not would be instantly cast into a white-hot furnace. 3 Jewish men who lived in the province of Babylon, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, refused to worship the statue. Even after being brought before the king and being questioned, they were steadfast and refused to worship with the rest of the people. Ultimately, they were cast into the fiery furnace, and they survived with the help of the Spirit. They were brought out of the furnace, and there was no sign on the men of having been burned. Nebuchadnezzar set them free. These men refused to worship openly with others, and instead worshipped their God quietly and reverently. They danced through the flames in the furnace, not in defiance of Nebuchadnezzar, but in celebration of the saving grace of their God. They, through their actions, reclaim their faith. Finally, Jesus tells the disciples to not neglect their appearances as the hypocrites do while they fast. We shouldn't be upset and look in such a way that others will know we're fasting. We fast so that we might focus on the generosity of God to get us through the adverse times. This is something which should bring us great joy and something on which we should focus, not the fleeting sympathies of others around us. We should learn Any adversity through which we pass is a gift from God, who will provide us with enough to pass through it. Elisha was sent to a widow in Zarephath in Sidon, who, along with her son, was on the verge of death. When Elisha asked her to make him some bread, she told him that she and her son were going to eat the very last of what they had, and then surely they would die. But Elisha insisted, telling her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as I have said." The widow did as Elisha said, prepared him a meal, and her oil and flour lasted long enough for them to eat for a long time. Her oil did not run dry, neither did her flour go empty. The widow, faced with great adversity, gave in faith, not complaining about her lack of bread and her oncoming death. She gave to Elisha, and in so doing, she reclaimed her faith. This Lent, practice the 3 marks of the season and draw yourself closer to God. Give alms like the widow at the temple treasury. Give freely and give quietly. Pray like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, quietly and intimately to God for only His ears. Fast and accept any discomfort with grace and dignity like the widow of Zarephath. Take hold of this opportunity which this Lenten season gives, and in the end, as Jesus tells us, our Father who sees in secret will repay you. Reclaim your faith this Lenten season and in the seasons to come, and may God bless you abundantly through this season of Lent.